The chapter's Hall of Ancestors stands silent most days, its vaulted ceiling disappearing into shadows that no amount of candles can fully illuminate. Row upon row of dreadnought sarcophagi line the chamber walls, each a walking tomb containing the shattered remains of heroes who served long before the current generation of space marines drew breath. These ancient warriors sleep away the centuries in stasis, awakened only for the direst battles or the most critical moments when the chapter needs wisdom that spans millennia. You can feel the weight of history in that hall. The air itself seems heavier, pressed down by the accumulated centuries of sacrifice contained within those armored shells. Young space marines fresh from their scout companies sometimes enter this place seeking guidance, hoping to learn from those who fought alongside the legends themselves. Warriors who stood in the presence of the Primarchs during the Great Crusade and the dark days of the Horus Heresy. They come with questions burning in their minds. What was Leman Russ truly like? Did Rogel Dawn ever smile? How did it feel to fight alongside beings who were more than human, who radiated an aura that made even space marines want to kneel? These young warriors have heard the stories their entire lives, read the official accounts, memorized the approved histories, but they hunger for something more, something real, something that goes beyond the sanitized legends that fill their chapter's archives. The tech priests move through the hall performing their sacred duties, anointing each sarcophagus with blessed oils, checking diagnostic readouts with practiced reverence. They speak in hushed tones, their augmented voices barely rising above whispers. To them, these dreadnoughts are not just war machines, but sacred relics, physical manifestations of the machine God's blessing upon the chapter. Each represents thousands of years of service, tens of thousands of battles, and wisdom accumulated across centuries that most mortals cannot fathom. But here's the thing that gnaws at those young space marines, the realization that slowly dawns as they spend more time in the presence of these ancient warriors. When the dreadnoughts do wake, when their machine spirits stir and their vox speakers crackle to life, when the chapter gathers to hear the words of those who walked with demigods, something strange happens. The ancients speak of tactics and strategy. They recount battle plans and enemy dispositions. They offer wisdom on siege warfare and void combat, on how to break an orc warband or outmaneuver an Eldar raiding party. But when asked about the Primarchs themselves, about what these godlike beings were truly like as individuals, the ancients grow evasive. Their answers become vague, couched in formal language and official doctrine. They speak of the Primarchs' tactical genius, their physical prowess, their unwavering loyalty to the Emperor. But they don't speak of personality, of quirks and habits, of moments of doubt or flashes of humor. They don't describe what it felt like to stand in that overwhelming presence, to experience the full force of a being who was as far beyond a space marine as a space marine is beyond a normal human. The silence that follows these questions is different from the silence that normally fills the Hall of Ancestors. It's heavier, more uncomfortable, tinged with something that might be pain or regret, or simply exhaustion. The young Marines sense it, but don't understand it. They press their questions further, seeking the human details that would make their Primarchs feel real rather than mythical. And the ancients deflect, change the subject, or simply withdraw back into their sarcophagi, declaring their waking period concluded. This pattern repeats across every chapter that maintains ancient dreadnoughts who served during the heresy era. From the space wolves Bjorn the Fell-Handed to the handful of blood angels, ancients who remember Sanguinius in life, the story is always the same. These warriors who fought beside the Primarchs, who knew them better than perhaps anyone save their fellow Primarchs, refused to paint a complete picture of what these beings were truly like. Why? What could possibly make these veterans, these heroes, who have faced every horror the galaxy can conjure, reluctant to share their memories of the greatest leaders mankind has ever produced? The answer to that question reveals one of the most tragic aspects of life as a dreadnought, and exposes the uncomfortable gap between the myths that chapters need and the realities that those myths are built upon. The Walking Dead. Understanding ancient dreadnoughts. To understand why ancient dreadnoughts won't speak freely about the Primarchs, we first need to understand what it means to be a dreadnought, to grasp the full horror and glory of this existence that the Imperium frames as the highest honor a space marine can receive. A space marine is already far beyond human. Genetically enhanced, psycho-conditioned, armed and armored to fight the galaxy's worst nightmares, these warriors are living weapons designed to know no fear. They can fight for days without rest, survive wounds that would kill a dozen normal men, and push their bodies to limits that would shatter lesser beings. They are the Imperium's finest, its most elite warriors, each one worth 100 normal soldiers. But even space marines can fall. A plasma blast tears through ceramite armor. An orc's power claw crushes a ribcage. A tyrannid's bioweapon dissolves flesh and bone. In battles across the galaxy, space marines face injuries that would mean certain death for anyone else. Their enhanced biology can heal most wounds, but there are limits. There are injuries so catastrophic that even Astartes' physiology cannot repair them. Damage so extensive that no amount of time in the apothecarian can make the warrior whole again. In most cases, such grievous wounds mean death. The apothecary extracts the fallen warrior's gene seed, the precious genetic material that will create future generations of space marines, and the brother is honored with funeral rites appropriate to his service. His name is added to the chapter's rolls of honor, his deeds recorded for future generations to remember and emulate. It is, by the standards of the Imperium, a good death. The warrior dies having served the Emperor, his sacrifice ensuring that the chapter continues. But for a select few, the greatest heroes of the chapter, there is another option. If even a spark of life remains, if the brain can be kept alive and the essential organs sustained, these warriors can be granted what the Imperium calls eternal service. They are interred within the armored sarcophagus at the heart of a dreadnought war machine, their shattered bodies connected to life support systems that will keep them alive for centuries or even millennia to come. The process is as horrific as it is sacred. What remains of the warrior's body is carefully preserved in amniotic fluids. Cybernetic connections are installed directly into the brain and nervous system. The sarcophagus becomes both tomb and womb, a sealed environment that sustains the fragments of flesh that once comprised a mighty warrior. When installed within a dreadnought chassis, these connections allow the entombed marine to control the massive walker as if it were his own body, to see through its optical sensors, to fire its weapons with thought alone. From the outside, a dreadnought is an imposing sight. Standing 3 to 4 times the height of a space marine, these walkers are mobile fortresses, bristling with enough firepower to level buildings. They stride across battlefields with mechanical precision, their weapons systems capable of engaging anything from massed infantry to enemy armor. The chassis itself is heavily armored, able to withstand punishment that would destroy a main battle tank. In terms of pure combat effectiveness, a dreadnought is worth a full squad of space marines or more. But this combat effectiveness comes at a terrible price, one that only becomes apparent when you understand what existence is like for the warrior sealed within that armored shell. Imagine for a moment what it means to have your physical form reduced to a few fragments kept alive by machines. You no longer have hands to feel with, feet to walk on, a face to express emotion. All of your natural senses are gone, replaced by mechanical approximations that feed data directly into your brain. You see through targeting arrays and optical sensors, each view filtered and processed by machine spirits before it reaches your consciousness. You hear through acoustic sensors that reduce the rich complexity of sound to electronic signals. Touch becomes nothing more than pressure readings on armor plates. You cannot eat, cannot drink, cannot smell the air, or feel the sun on your skin. All the small pleasures that make life bearable are gone. There is only the amniotic fluid surrounding what remains of your body, the constant mechanical hum of the systems keeping you alive, and the darkness of the sarcophagus when the dreadnought is not activated. This is your existence now, and it will continue for as long as your brain continues to function and the chapter has need of your service. For most dreadnoughts, this service extends across centuries. The oldest dreadnoughts have served for millennia, awakened time and again across thousands of years to fight battles that span the length and breadth of the galaxy. Between these periods of activation, they sleep in stasis, their consciousness suppressed to prevent the psychological damage that constant awareness would inflict. Even with these periods of enforced slumber, the toll on the mind is immense. Extended neural interface with a vehicle as large and complex as a dreadnought causes conditions that the Imperium's medici have documented but cannot prevent. Lethargy, confusion, dyschronometria, where the perception of time becomes distorted, and eventually various forms of senility. The longer a warrior remains entombed, the more their mind begins to deteriorate, eroded by the sheer unnaturalness of their existence. But it's not just the mechanical aspects of the existence that wear on the entombed warriors. It's the isolation, the slow realization that they are becoming separated from everything they once knew. With each awakening, the faces around them are different. The brothers they fought beside are dead, their successors now serving in their places. The chapter's traditions evolve, tactics change, even the language subtly shifts across the centuries. The dreadnought awakens to find himself increasingly out of place in his own chapter, a relic from a bygone era struggling to relate to warriors who see him as a legend rather than a battle brother. This is perhaps the cruelest aspect of dreadnought existence. The warrior is granted what appears to be immortality, the chance to serve the Emperor across centuries that normal humans cannot conceive. But it is an immortality without companionship, without the bonds of brotherhood that sustained him through his mortal years. He becomes a living ghost, a remnant from the past, honored by those who cannot truly understand him. The oldest dreadnoughts, those who have served since the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy, have experienced this isolation magnified 1,000-fold. They have been awake and asleep across 10,000 years of Imperial history. Every single person they once knew is long dead. The Imperium itself has transformed beyond recognition, the bright hope of the Great Crusade replaced by the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. These ancient warriors are strangers in their own time, living artifacts whose memories stretch back to an age that exists now only in legend and heavily censored historical records. Consider Bjorn the Fell-Handed, the most famous of all ancient dreadnoughts. He fought alongside Leman Russ during the Great Crusade, stood in the presence of the Emperor himself, participated in some of the most significant battles of the Horus Heresy, and served as the first Great Wolf of the Space Wolves chapter after Russ's disappearance. He has been serving in his dreadnought chassis for over 10,000 years, awakened periodically to lend his wisdom and martial might to his chapter's most desperate hours. Bjorn is revered by the Space Wolves beyond measure. Once per century, he is awakened so that he can recount tales of Leman Russ and the earliest days of the chapter. The assembled Space Wolves gather in absolute silence to hear his words, treating every utterance as sacred scripture. To them, Bjorn is a living connection to their Primarch, the only being left in the galaxy who can speak with first-hand knowledge of what the Wolf King was truly like. And yet, Bjorn's accounts have grown increasingly terse over the millennia. Where once he might have regaled his battle brothers with detailed stories, now he speaks in broad strokes, hitting the key points but lacking the rich detail that would make the past come alive. Some accounts suggest he has grown deliberately evasive when pressed for the personal details about Russ, offering tactical assessments and strategic observations, but deflecting questions about the Primarch's personality or private moments. This pattern appears across other ancient dreadnoughts as well. The handful of blood angels who remember Sanguinius speak of his tactical brilliance and his prowess in battle, but they don't describe the man himself in any real detail. Iron Hands ancients who served under Ferrus Manus recount his legendary strength and his skill with technology, but the personal details remain frustratingly absent. Even among traitor legions, the oldest dreadnoughts who remember their Primarchs before the fall are reluctant to provide complete accounts of what these beings were truly like. For the chapters that maintain these ancient dreadnoughts, this reluctance creates a frustrating gap in their historical understanding. They possess warriors who lived through the most significant period in Imperial history, who fought alongside demigods, who witnessed events that shaped the entire galaxy. And yet these warriors, for reasons they rarely articulate clearly, refuse to provide the full picture of what they experienced. Demigods walking among men, the true nature of the Primarchs. To understand the ancients' reluctance, we need to grasp what the Primarchs actually were, not as the Imperium portrays them in its propaganda and official histories, but as beings who existed in physical reality among the warriors who served them. The Primarchs were the Emperor's greatest creation, 20 genetically engineered sons designed to lead humanity's reconquest of the galaxy. The Emperor of mankind, already a being of such immense power and presence that few could look upon him directly, poured everything he knew about genetics, warpcraft, and the fundamental nature of life itself into creating these superhuman generals. Each Primarch was intended to embody specific aspects of the Emperor's own capabilities, to be not just leaders of men, but living weapons capable of turning the tide of entire wars through their mere presence. When we talk about what the Primarchs were like, we have to understand that they existed on a completely different scale from even the Space Marines who served under them. A Space Marine, as impressive as he might be, is still fundamentally human in his basic nature, enhanced, certainly, psycho-conditioned to know no fear and serve without question. But underneath all the genetic modification and surgical enhancement, there remains a human core, a mind that processes experience in ways that baseline humans can understand, even if they cannot match. The Primarchs were something else entirely. They were beings who stood between humanity and divinity, possessing capabilities that pushed the boundaries of what physical matter could accomplish. Each stood roughly twice the height of a normal Space Marine, but their size was the least impressive thing about them. What truly set them apart was the sheer presence they radiated, an almost physical pressure that affected everyone in their vicinity. Multiple accounts from the Horus Heresy era describe the effect of being near a Primarch. Normal humans often found themselves unable to think clearly in their presence, overwhelmed by an instinctual urge to kneel or flee, depending on the Primarch's mood. Even Space Marines, warriors conditioned to know no fear, felt their will bend in the presence of their genetic father. It wasn't mind control exactly, but rather a natural consequence of being near a being whose very existence warped reality around them. This presence manifested differently for each Primarch, reflecting their individual nature and the specific traits the Emperor had emphasized in their creation. Sanguinius of the Blood Angels radiated such nobility and grace that even enemies hesitated to strike him down. Angron of the World Eaters projected such raw rage and violence that his mere presence could drive lesser beings to madness. Magnus the Red's psychic might was so overwhelming that weaker minds could be damaged simply by being in the same room when he was agitated. Guilliman of the Ultramarines emanated such confidence and competence that others found themselves naturally deferring to his judgment. But it wasn't just presence. The Primarchs possessed physical capabilities that seemed to defy natural law. They could fight for days without rest, process information with superhuman speed, and demonstrate strength that no amount of genetic enhancement alone could explain. Leman Russ could tear apart armored vehicles with his bare hands. Vulcan's physical resilience was such that he survived injuries that should have been instantly fatal, even to a Primarch. Lionel Johnson's combat prowess was so refined that he could defeat multiple Space Marines simultaneously without apparent effort. Their minds were equally superhuman. Guilliman could process tactical situations involving millions of soldiers across entire star systems, holding the full complexity of such engagements in his head simultaneously. Perturabo could glance at a fortress and immediately conceive of a dozen ways to breach its defenses, his mind performing calculations that would take a team of engineers days to work through. Magnus possessed psychic capabilities that exceeded most entire orders of psychers, able to navigate the warp with a certainty that others could only dream of achieving. Each Primarch was unique, possessing not just different capabilities, but fundamentally different personalities. This is crucial to understand because the Imperium's official accounts tend to flatten these differences, presenting the Primarchs as interchangeable paragons of virtue who differed only in their specific areas of expertise. The reality was far more complex. Horus Lupercal, the War Master who would eventually betray the Emperor and plunge the galaxy into civil war, was renowned for his charisma and his ability to win people to his cause. He had a gift for making each person feel valued and understood, for seeing what motivated them and appealing to those motivations. His brother Primarchs loved him, not just because he was the first recovered, or because the Emperor favored him, but because he genuinely connected with them in ways that even the Emperor often could not. This same gift for reading and manipulating people would later serve him well as he corrupted half the legions to his rebellion. Rogel Dawn of the Imperial Fists was Horus's opposite in many ways. Where Horus built relationships through charm and persuasion, Dawn commanded through absolute competence and unshakable duty. He was famously blunt to the point of tactlessness, incapable of the diplomatic niceties that came naturally to Horus. But no one questioned his loyalty or his capabilities, and the Emperor trusted him with Terra's defense because he knew Dawn would never waver, no matter how impossible the task appeared. Conrad Kersey of the Night Lords embodied the darker aspects of justice, governing through terror and exemplifying punishment. His mind was scarred by visions of the future, showing him constantly how he and everyone around him would die. This inflicted such psychological damage that by the time of the heresy, many of his brothers questioned whether he had ever truly been sane. Yet his legion's tactics of using fear as a weapon proved devastatingly effective, bringing worlds to compliance through reputation alone. Lorgar Aurelian of the Wordbearers was perhaps the most devout of all the Primarchs, constantly seeking meaning beyond the material and yearning for something to worship. His need for faith, combined with the Emperor's rejection of religion, would eventually drive him to chaos and set in motion the events that led to the Horus heresy. But before his fall, he was a thoughtful scholar and philosopher, deeply concerned with questions of meaning and purpose that his more practically minded brothers often dismissed. Each Primarch, in other words, was not just a military genius or a physical powerhouse, but a complete individual with distinct personality traits, preferences, quirks, and flaws. They argued with each other, formed friendships and rivalries, had moments of doubt and displays of ego. They were, despite their superhuman capabilities, recognizably people in ways that made them both inspiring and dangerous. For the Space Marines who served under these beings, the experience was overwhelming in ways that are difficult to convey. To stand in the presence of your Primarch was to feel the full weight of your genetic heritage made manifest. You saw in him the ultimate expression of what you could never quite become, the perfect realization of the gene seed that had been implanted in your body. The instinct to follow him, to serve him, to die for him if necessary, was coded into your very biology. You couldn't help but love him, couldn't help but see him as the absolute center of your world. This created incredibly powerful bonds between Primarchs and their legions. The Space Marines of the Lunar Wolves, later the Sons of Horus, would have followed Horus into the heart of the warp itself, because their devotion to him transcended rational thought. The Space Wolves howled for Leman Russ not because they were ordered to, but because the urge to express their connection to him was as natural as breathing. The Blood Angels revered Sanguinius with an intensity that bordered on worship, seeing in him the perfect embodiment of nobility and martial prowess. But these bonds also created tremendous vulnerability. When a Primarch fell to chaos or made catastrophic decisions, their legions followed. The Emperor's children descended into depravity because Fulgrim did. The Death Guard embraced Nurgle's corruption because Mortarion led them into it. The World Eaters became mindless berserkers because Angron's example and expectations pushed them in that direction. The bond between Primarch and Legion was so strong that it overrode individual judgment, turning entire armies of superhuman warriors into extensions of their father's will. This is the context that ancient dreadnoughts carry with them. They knew the Primarchs when these beings walked among them. They experienced firsthand the overwhelming presence, the genetic imperative to serve, the bond that transcended words or conscious thought. They saw these demigods at their finest moments and, in some cases, at their lowest. They witnessed things that the official histories can never fully capture, because the emotional reality of serving a Primarch cannot be adequately conveyed through second-hand accounts. And now, 10,000 years later, they are expected to describe these experiences to Space Marines who have never known anything like it, who can barely conceive of what it meant to serve a Primarch directly. The ancients are asked to put into words something that was always beyond words, to make comprehensible an experience that fundamentally resists comprehension. Small wonder, then, that they might find the task daunting enough to avoid it altogether. The erosion of memory. When the past becomes fog. There's another factor that makes ancient dreadnoughts reluctant to speak in detail about the Primarchs, one that is perhaps more tragic than any ideological or emotional reason. Simply put, after 10,000 years entombed in a dreadnought chassis, many of them can no longer remember the details they're being asked to recount. Memory is a fragile thing, even under normal circumstances. Human beings forget details constantly, their recollections colored by emotion, distorted by time, reshaped by subsequent experiences. What we remember about any given event is not an objective recording, but a reconstruction, our brains filling in gaps and smoothing over inconsistencies to create a coherent narrative. This process happens automatically and unconsciously, which means we're often unaware of how much our memories differ from the actual events they supposedly represent. Space Marines, with their enhanced biology and psycho-conditioning, have better memory retention than baseline humans. Their recall is more precise, their ability to separate important details from irrelevant ones more refined. They can remember tactical situations with remarkable clarity, recounting exactly where each enemy unit was positioned, or precisely which orders were given at what time. Their training emphasizes this capability, because effective warfare requires learning from past engagements. But even Space Marine memory has limits, and the conditions of dreadnought existence push well beyond those limits. The problem begins with the simple passage of time. 10,000 years is an incomprehensible span for human consciousness to process. For context, 10,000 years ago from our present time, human civilization was just beginning to develop agriculture. Everything we think of as history, every empire that has risen and fallen, every cultural achievement we celebrate, all of it has occurred in less time than these ancient dreadnoughts have been serving. No biological entity, not even one enhanced to Astarte's standards, is designed to maintain coherent memories across such timescales. The human brain, even when augmented by the genetic modifications that create a Space Marine, has finite storage capacity. New memories must overwrite old ones. Details fade. Events that seemed crystal clear at the time become hazy, the edges softening until only the broad outlines remain. For ancient dreadnoughts, this natural memory decay is accelerated by the conditions of their existence. Remember that they spend most of their time in stasis, their consciousness suppressed to prevent psychological damage from constant awareness. When they're awakened, it might be decades or even centuries since their last period of activity. Each awakening requires them to rebuild their sense of self, to remember who they are and what purpose they serve. This constant cycling between consciousness and enforced sleep creates additional strain on memory formation and retention. Moreover, the neural interface that connects the entombed warrior to his dreadnought chassis is not a perfect system. Extended use causes documented neurological problems. The brain begins to struggle with distinguishing between the body's natural sensory input, which no longer exists, and the machine's sensory data being fed directly into neural pathways. This creates a kind of sensory confusion that can affect memory formation. Some dreadnoughts report that their memories from before internment become increasingly dreamlike, taking on a quality that makes them wonder if they actually experienced these events or merely imagined them. The vividness fades, the certainty erodes. What once was a clear recollection of standing in the Primarch's presence becomes a general sense that it happened, with the specific details having faded into fog. The oldest dreadnoughts, those who have served since the Horus heresy, have been dealing with these effects for millennia. Bjorn the Fell-Handed has been entombed for over 10,000 years. During that time, he has been awakened hundreds of times for battles and ceremonial occasions. With each awakening, he is expected to remember events that for him now lie buried under 10 millennia of subsequent experience. Think about what that means. The Battle of Prospero, where Bjorn lost his arm fighting against the Thousand Sons, happened 10,000 years ago. The last time Bjorn saw Leman Russ, when the Primarch departed into the Eye of Terror, happened roughly 9,700 years ago. For Bjorn, these events are separated from his present awareness by a gulf of time so vast that even his enhanced Space Marine memory cannot fully bridge it. Lore accounts suggest that Bjorn's memories of Leman Russ have degraded over the millennia. Where once he could recount specific conversations, describe the exact timbre of Russ's voice, recall the little details that made his Primarch human despite his superhuman nature, now Bjorn speaks in broader terms. He remembers the Primarch's leadership style, his tactical preferences, his general demeanor, but the intimate details, the things that would make Leman Russ feel like a real person rather than a mythological figure, those have faded with time. This is not because Bjorn doesn't care or because he's deliberately withholding information. It's simply because his brain, despite all its enhancement and despite the best preservation technology the Adeptus Mechanicus can provide, cannot perfectly maintain memories across 10,000 years of existence. The details have been worn away by time, like words carved into stone gradually eroded by wind and rain until only fragments remain legible. Other ancient dreadnoughts face similar challenges. The few Blood Angels ancients who remember Sanguinius find their recollections growing increasingly impressionistic. They remember the feeling of being in his presence, the overwhelming sense of nobility and perfection he radiated. But specific moments, individual conversations, the small details that would humanize their Primarch, these have become difficult to pin down with certainty. There's another factor at play as well. The longer a warrior remains in a dreadnought, the more their personality begins to change. The constant interface with machine systems, the lack of normal human sensory input, the cycles of sleep and waking across centuries, all of these affect who they are at a fundamental level. The person they were when first interred is not quite the same person who wakes 10,000 years later. This gradual transformation affects memory in insidious ways. As the dreadnought's personality shifts, they may lose connection to memories that were tied to their earlier self. Events that once held deep emotional significance may become distant, viewed as if they happened to someone else. The Space Marine who stood in awe of his Primarch gradually becomes the ancient, whose perspective has been reshaped by millennia of service, and in that transformation, some of the emotional immediacy of those early memories is inevitably lost. Some accounts suggest that certain dreadnoughts actively feel their memories fading and find the experience deeply distressing. They know they once knew more than they can now recall. They're aware that important details have slipped away, but they cannot recover them, no matter how hard they try. This awareness of memory loss creates its own form of grief, a mourning for a past that they can no longer fully access. Imagine being Bjorn, awakened for the 1000th time to recount stories of Lem and Russ to eager young space wolves. You know you were there, you remember being there. But when you reach for the specific details, all you find are broad outlines and general impressions. You can describe what Russ looked like, his general demeanor, the kinds of things he typically said. But the vividness is gone. The conversation you're certain you had with him after a particular battle has become a blur of possible words that might have been said. The gesture you're sure he made, some characteristic motion that was uniquely his, you can no longer quite visualize it clearly. And the young space wolves look at you with such hope and expectation, hungry for details that will make their legendary Primarch feel real to them. They want to know what his laugh sounded like, what jokes he told, how he acted when no one important was watching. They want the human details that would transform Russ from a figure of legend into a person they could have known. But you can't give them what they want, because those details have faded from your mind, like morning mist burned away by the sun. You know you once knew these things. You're certain they existed, but they're gone now, eroded by time and the conditions of your existence. And no amount of desire or effort can bring them back. So instead, you give them what you can. You speak of Russ's tactical genius, his preference for close-quarters combat, his loyalty to the Emperor. You provide the historical facts and strategic observations that your military memory has retained. But the personal details, the things that would truly answer their questions, those are lost to you now. This is one reason why ancient dreadnoughts might be reluctant to speak extensively about their Primarchs. They're aware of the gaps in their memory. They know their recollections are incomplete. And rather than admit to this incompleteness, rather than disappoint their battle brothers by revealing how much has been lost to time, they simply avoid the conversation altogether. Better to be thought mysterious or protective of sacred memories than to admit that those memories have degraded beyond reliable recovery. The tragedy is that even this reluctance is temporary. Eventually, given enough time, even the awareness that memories are missing will fade. The ancient will remember that he once knew the Primarch, but will have no sense that anything important has been lost. The gaps will no longer bother him, because he won't remember that they're gaps. What remains will feel complete, even though it represents only a fraction of what he once knew. This is the endpoint that all ancient dreadnoughts march toward. Not death, which would be a mercy, but a gradual fading of everything that made them who they were, until only the barest outline of their original self remains. They become walking databases of tactical information, their memories of personal connections and emotional experiences gradually eroded away until only military knowledge persists. And this process affects their memories of the Primarchs most severely, because those memories are tied so intimately to emotion and personal experience. The tactical lessons learned from serving under a Primarch can be abstracted and preserved. But what it felt like to be in that Primarch's presence, the unique characteristics that made him different from his brothers, the small human moments that showed his personality, these are exactly the kind of memories that fade first. The weight of betrayal, wounds that cannot heal. But there's something even darker lurking beneath the surface, something that makes many ancient dreadnoughts even more reluctant to speak freely about the Primarchs. It's not just the passage of time or the degradation of memory. It's the wound that was inflicted during the Horus heresy itself, a trauma so profound that 10,000 years has not been enough to heal it. To understand this trauma, we need to talk about what the Horus heresy actually meant for the Space Marines who lived through it. The official histories present it as a great betrayal, certainly, but they present it in abstract terms. Half the legions turned traitor. Brother fought brother. The Imperium was nearly destroyed. These statements convey the scale of the conflict, but not its emotional reality for those who experienced it. For the Space Marines who remained loyal, The heresy was the complete destruction of everything they thought they understood about the universe. Remember that these warriors had been created to serve the Primarchs. Their entire existence revolved around their genetic connection to their father. The bond between Primarch and Legion was deeper than mere loyalty or duty. It was written into their very cells, an imperative as fundamental as breathing. And then, without warning, half of those Primarchs turned against the Emperor. The beings these warriors had been literally designed to love and obey revealed themselves to be traitors. Worse, they commanded their legions to follow them into damnation. And most of those legions obeyed without question, because the imperative to serve their Primarch overwhelmed any other consideration. But not all of them obeyed. In each traitor legion, there were warriors who remained loyal to the Emperor, despite the genetic imperative pulling them toward their Primarch. These were the ones who found themselves on Istvan III, betrayed by their own legion, fighting desperately against brothers they had served alongside for decades. These were the ones who experienced the heresy not as an abstract political conflict, but as a deeply personal betrayal that shattered their entire understanding of themselves. The ancient Dreadnoughts who survived this period carry those wounds still. They remember what it was like to love their Primarch with every fiber of their being, to serve him with absolute devotion, to believe that this bond was sacred and eternal. And then they remember the moment when that belief was revealed to be a lie, when their Primarch showed himself to be something other than what they had believed, when the foundation of their entire existence cracked beneath them. For the loyalist ancients who served under traitor Primarchs, this trauma is even more acute. Consider Rillanor, the Ancient of Rights of the Emperor's Children, one of the most famous examples of this phenomenon. Rillanor served Fulgrim for decades, fighting in countless battles, upholding the ideals of perfection that the Third Legion had always embodied. He was one of the first to bear the Palatine Aquila, a mark of honor that showed him to be among the most respected warriors in the entire Legion. Then came Istvan III, when Fulgrim revealed his betrayal and ordered the loyal elements of his legion to be purged. Rillanor survived the initial virus bombing and fought on alongside other loyalists against impossible odds. He watched his brothers die, killed by other brothers who wore the same colors and served the same Primarch. The perfection he had believed in was revealed to be a mask for corruption and depravity. Rillanor survived, trapped in the ruins of Istvan III for 10,000 years, his dreadnought chassis damaged, his mobility limited, alone in the dark, with nothing but his rage and his grief. When Fulgrim finally returned to the planet millennia later, Rillanor attempted to destroy his former Primarch with a virus bomb, willing to die if it meant taking revenge for the betrayal that had destroyed everything he once held dear. The attempt failed, but Rylanor's defiance in the face of his corrupted gene-sire became legendary. Even a group of 1,000 Sons sorcerers who had accompanied Fulgrim were moved by the ancient's unwavering loyalty, choosing in that moment to honor his sacrifice rather than continue serving their own corrupted cause. Rillanor died, finally, after 10,000 years of waiting, having spit his rejection of Fulgrim directly into the demon Primarch's face. Rillanor's story is extreme, but it illustrates the depth of trauma that the heresy inflicted on those who lived through it. For 10,000 years, he carried the wound of Fulgrim's betrayal, unable to process it, unable to move past it, defined utterly by that moment when everything he believed in was destroyed. And Rillanor was not unique. There are other ancients scattered across loyal chapters who carry similar wounds, warriors who remember what it was like to believe in a Primarch absolutely, and then have that belief shattered. But the trauma extends beyond just the warriors who served under traitor Primarchs. Even those who served under loyal Primarchs carry wounds from the heresy. They remember fighting against Space Marines who looked just like them, who shared the same training and doctrine, who were brothers in every way that mattered except loyalty. They remember the horror of battles where every enemy killed was not an alien monster or a chaos cultist, but another space marine, another son of the Emperor who had chosen the wrong side or been on the wrong legion when the Primarchs declared for Horus. They remember Primarchs fighting each other, those demigod beings who were supposed to be leading humanity to a glorious future, instead trying to kill one another. They saw Fulgrim murder Ferrus Manus, one Primarch personally executing another. They witnessed the corruption and transformation of beings who should have been incorruptible, watched as warriors and leaders they had revered descended into depths of depravity that defied comprehension. For ancient Dreadnoughts, who remember the Great Crusade, this represents a complete inversion of everything they thought they were fighting for. During the Crusade, the purpose was clear: unite humanity, bring the lost worlds back into the Imperial fold, destroy the alien and the mutant, create a galaxy where humanity could thrive under the Emperor's guidance. The Primarchs were the instruments of this great work, each leading their legion to glorious victories that brought the dream of human unity closer to reality. Then the heresy turned all of it into a nightmare. The unity fractured. The Primarchs revealed themselves to be as fallible and corruptible as anyone else. The great work of the Crusade ground to a halt as the Imperium turned its weapons on itself. And in the end, the Emperor himself was struck down, not by some external enemy, but by his most beloved son, forced to sit upon the golden throne for eternity, a living corpse sustaining the Astronomicon through constant agony. The ancients remember all of this. They remember believing in the Great Crusade's promise. They remember the hope and purpose that drove them forward during those early campaigns. And they remember watching it all collapse, seeing the dream die and be replaced by the grim reality of an Imperium that survives through sheer stubbornness rather than any grand vision of the future. This is why asking them to describe what the Primarchs were really like is such a fraught request. To answer honestly would require them to acknowledge the full complexity of these beings, including their flaws and weaknesses. It would require admitting that the demigods they served were capable of catastrophic errors in judgment, of pride so overwhelming that it blinded them to obvious manipulation, of personal grudges and petty jealousies that influenced decisions affecting billions of lives. For an ancient who survived the heresy by maintaining absolute loyalty to the Emperor, admitting these truths about the Primarchs feels dangerous. It feels like betraying them all over again, like giving aid to the traitors by acknowledging that even the loyal Primarchs were flawed beings who made mistakes. Better to maintain the official narrative, to speak only of their virtues and accomplishments, to present them as the paragons that the Imperium needs them to be, rather than the complicated, sometimes contradictory individuals they actually were. Moreover, for ancients who served under traitor Primarchs and survived by rejecting that service, the wounds go even deeper. To describe what Fulgrim or Horus or any of the traitor Primarchs were really like before their fall would require acknowledging that these beings were not always monsters. They were, at one point, genuinely noble and worthy of service. Fulgrim really did embody perfection, before corruption twisted that ideal into something obscene. Horus really was the most charismatic and capable of all the Primarchs, before ambition and chaos turned him into a monster. Acknowledging this creates an impossible tension. If the traitor Primarchs were once truly worthy of devotion, then the genetic imperative to serve them was not misplaced. The loyalty those ancients felt was not foolish or wrong, but an appropriate response to beings who deserved that loyalty. Which means the betrayal becomes even more painful because it represents not just a political defection, but a fundamental corruption of something that was genuinely good. The alternative is to retroactively paint the traitor Primarchs as always having been flawed, to reinterpret their actions before the heresy as evidence of corruption that was simply not yet fully manifested. This allows the loyal warriors who survived to maintain that their current hatred of the traitors is entirely justified and always would have been. But it requires a form of historical revisionism that goes against what they actually remember. So the ancient Dreadnoughts face an impossible choice when asked to describe their Primarchs honestly. They can tell the truth, acknowledging the full complexity and contradictions of these beings, and risk undermining the myths that their chapters need. Or they can simplify and sanitize, providing only the approved narrative, but at the cost of falsifying their own memories and experiences. Many choose a third option. They simply refuse to engage with the question in detail. They provide vague, general answers that satisfy the immediate inquiry without revealing anything substantial. They deflect, change the subject, or simply withdraw back into their sarcophagi, ending the conversation before it can delve too deeply into topics they would prefer not to explore. This is not cowardice. It's a form of self-preservation, a way of protecting wounds that have never fully healed. 10,000 years is apparently not long enough to recover from having your entire worldview shattered by the beings you were created to serve. The trauma remains, buried perhaps, but still present, still capable of causing pain when prodded too directly. The burden of being a legend. There's another layer to this reluctance that has less to do with the ancients themselves and more to do with how they're perceived by their chapters. Ancient Dreadnoughts occupy a unique position within Space Marine culture. They are not just veterans or honored warriors. They are living relics, physical connections to a past that everyone else knows only through records and legends. This status confers tremendous respect, but also creates expectations that can be suffocating. Young Space Marines view ancient Dreadnoughts with a mixture of awe and reverence that borders on worship. These are warriors who fought during the Great Crusade, who saw the Emperor with their own eyes, who served directly under the Primarchs. In the minds of younger battle brothers, the ancients represent a golden age when everything was somehow better and more pure, when the Imperium was ascendant rather than merely surviving. This idealization creates immense pressure on the ancients. They are expected to embody perfection, to represent the highest ideals of their chapter, to serve as living proof that the legends are true and that the sacrifices demanded by the Imperium are worthwhile. Every word they speak is analyzed and remembered, added to the chapter's oral tradition, potentially quoted for centuries to come. They cannot afford to be uncertain or doubtful, because doubt from a figure of such authority could undermine the faith that holds everything together. This pressure is particularly intense when it comes to the Primarchs. The Space Marines, who never knew their genetic father, have built elaborate mythologies around him, stories that give meaning and purpose to their existence. These myths are necessary. They provide the chapter with identity, with a sense of continuity across 10,000 years, with examples to emulate and ideals to uphold. Without these stories, the chapter would be just another military organization rather than a brotherhood bound by sacred bonds to a legendary father figure. The ancient Dreadnoughts are expected to validate and reinforce these myths. When they speak of the Primarch, their words should confirm what the chapter already believes. The Primarch should be presented as infinitely wise, perfectly noble, absolutely dedicated to the Emperor and the Imperium. Any deviation from this narrative is not just unexpected, but potentially dangerous to the chapter's cohesion and morale. But the ancients remember a more complicated truth. They remember that Leman Russ could be boastful and crude. They remember that Rogel Dawn could be unnecessarily harsh. They remember that even Sanguinius, most beloved of all Primarchs, had moments of doubt and fear. They remember that the Primarchs were people, not statues, and that being a person means having flaws and making mistakes. Revealing these truths would not serve the chapter's needs. In fact, it might actively harm the chapter by undermining the myths that hold everything together. So the ancients face a choice. They can tell the truth as they remember it, risking damage to their chapter's morale and identity, or they can reinforce the myths, even though doing so means falsifying their own memories. Many choose to reinforce the myths, at least to some degree. When they speak of the Primarchs, They emphasize the positive qualities and downplay the negative ones. They describe moments of brilliance and gloss over moments of error. They present their Primarchs as the legends require them to be, rather than as they actually were. But this choice comes with a cost. Each time an ancient chooses myth over truth, he betrays his own memories a little bit. He contributes to the distortion of history, ensuring that future generations will know the legend but not the reality. And he reinforces the gap between what he knows and what he's allowed to say, a gap that can grow increasingly uncomfortable over time. Some ancients handle this tension by becoming increasingly taciturn. They speak only when absolutely necessary, offering minimal details, refusing to elaborate even when pressed. This allows them to fulfill their role as chapter legends without having to actively participate in the falsification of history. They neither confirm nor deny the myths. They simply exist, their continued survival serving as proof that the past was real, even if the details remain deliberately vague. Others take a different approach, becoming storytellers who carefully craft their narratives to serve specific purposes. They know which stories the chapter needs to hear, which examples will inspire the current generation, which lessons from the past apply to present challenges. They become selective historians, choosing what to reveal and what to withhold based on what will best serve the chapter's interests, rather than what most accurately reflects the historical truth. Both approaches require the ancient to maintain a careful distance between his actual memories and what he presents to his battle brothers. He must constantly evaluate whether a given detail should be shared or withheld, whether a particular story serves the chapter's needs or might undermine its cohesion. This constant self-censorship is exhausting, adding another burden to an existence already defined by isolation and the slow erosion of identity. The youngest Space Marines, eager for details about their Primarch, often don't understand why the ancients are so careful with their words. They assume the hesitation reflects the sacred nature of the memories being protected, that the ancients are simply being appropriately reverent when discussing beings who were more than human. They don't realize that the hesitation might reflect something more complicated, a tension between truth and myth that the ancient can never fully resolve. This misunderstanding creates a kind of tragedy in its own right. The young warriors so desperately want to know their Primarch, to understand what he was truly like, to feel some connection to this legendary figure who defines their chapter's identity. And the ancient wants to give them that connection, wants to share memories that might bring their father to life in their minds. But he cannot do so honestly without risking the destruction of myths that the chapter needs to survive. So instead, the ancient provides carefully curated information. He speaks in generalities and approved narratives. He offers tactical observations and strategic lessons while avoiding personal details. He becomes a disappointing source of information precisely because he's trying to protect his battle brothers from truths they're not ready to handle. The chapter, in turn, interprets this reticence as appropriate reverence. The official position becomes that the ancients' memories of the Primarch are too sacred to be casually discussed, that these experiences belong to a golden age that current warriors can aspire to but never fully understand. This interpretation allows everyone to save face. The ancient doesn't have to admit that he's actively censoring his own memories, and the chapter doesn't have to confront the possibility that its beloved myths might be distortions of a more complicated truth. But underneath this comfortable arrangement lies a fundamental dishonesty that eats away at the ancient sense of self. He knows what he's doing. He's aware that he's contributing to a false narrative. And each time he does so, he drives another wedge between who he actually was and who the chapter needs him to be. Over millennia, this gap can become so wide that the ancient himself begins to lose track of where the truth ends and the myth begins. The institutional need for perfect legends. The reluctance of ancient dreadnoughts to speak honestly about the Primarchs isn't just a personal choice or a response to individual trauma. It's also, in many ways, something that the Imperium itself actively encourages. The institutions that govern Space Marine chapters have a vested interest in maintaining simplified, heroic narratives about the Primarchs, and they exert subtle but persistent pressure on the Ancients to conform to these narratives. Consider how Space Marine chapters function as organizations. They are not just military units, but also keepers of tradition, custodians of their own history, and guardians of their Primarch's legacy. Everything they do is filtered through the lens of what would our father want? Their combat doctrine, their recruitment practices, their internal rituals, all of these are justified by reference to the Primarch's supposed preferences and values. For this system to work effectively, the Primarch's image must remain consistent and clear. He must represent specific virtues, embody particular ideals, serve as an unambiguous example for his sons to follow. Any complexity or contradiction in that image creates doctrinal confusion that can cascade through the entire chapter. If the Space Wolves were to learn that Leman Russ actually had serious doubts about some of the Emperor's orders during the Great Crusade, it might lead them to question their own doctrine of absolute loyalty. If the Imperial Fists discovered that Rogel Dawn sometimes made strategic errors despite his legendary competence, it might undermine their confidence in their own judgment. If the Blood Angels learned that Sanguinius struggled more deeply with his martial rage than official accounts suggest, it might make them question whether their own efforts at self-control are futile. The institutional leadership of each chapter understands this dynamic. The chapter masters, chaplains, and librarians who shape doctrine and maintain tradition have a responsibility to preserve the chapter's identity across centuries. They know that this identity depends on maintaining a particular image of their Primarch, one that serves the chapter's operational and spiritual needs, rather than necessarily reflecting historical accuracy. This creates a situation where ancient Dreadnoughts, who remember the Primarchs, directly find themselves under institutional pressure to conform to approved narratives. The pressure is rarely overt. No one outright tells an ancient that he must lie about his memories. But the expectations are clear. When an ancient speaks about the Primarch, his words should reinforce doctrine, should inspire the current generation, should align with the chapter's understanding of its own identity and purpose. Ancients who deviate from these expectations often find themselves politely but firmly corrected. Their stories are reinterpreted by chaplains to align with approved doctrine. Their words are quoted selectively, with any problematic elements quietly omitted. If an ancient becomes particularly troublesome, persistently offering accounts that contradict official narratives, he might find himself awakened less frequently. His counsel sought only for tactical matters, rather than historical questions. This institutional pressure is perhaps strongest in chapters that maintain particularly rigid or idealized views of their Primarch. The Ultramarines, for instance, revere Robert Guilliman as the model of strategic genius and administrative competence. Their entire identity is built around the Codex Astartes, Guilliman's great work, defining how Space Marines should organize and fight. Any suggestion that Guilliman might have had significant flaws or made serious mistakes could undermine the Codex's authority and, by extension, the chapter's entire operational philosophy. The Dark Angels face an even more extreme version of this dynamic because of the secret they guard so carefully. The fact that a portion of their legion fell to chaos during the heresy is knowledge restricted to the chapter's inner circle. Ancient Dreadnoughts who remember those events are caught between their memories of what actually happened and the approved narrative that must be maintained at all costs. They cannot speak honestly about that period of their history without revealing secrets that could destroy the chapter's reputation if they became widely known. In some cases, this institutional pressure extends to physically preventing ancients from speaking freely. Dreadnoughts are awakened by tech priests under the direction of chapter leadership. If the leadership decides that a particular ancient's recollections are becoming problematic, they can simply choose not to wake him. He remains in stasis, his inconvenient memories safely locked away, while younger ancients whose accounts align better with current doctrine are awakened instead. The tragedy is that this institutional pressure often aligns with the ancient's own reluctance to share difficult truths. The ancient doesn't want to undermine his chapter's morale by revealing his Primarch's flaws. The chapter leadership doesn't want those flaws revealed because of the potential damage to doctrine and cohesion. So both parties collaborate, perhaps unconsciously, in maintaining a narrative that neither fully believes, but that serves everyone's immediate needs. This creates a situation where the truest accounts of what the Primarchs were actually like are systematically suppressed, not through any conscious conspiracy, but through the combined effect of individual reluctance and institutional pressure. The Space Marines who actually knew the Primarchs carry memories that would complicate or contradict approved narratives, but they're incentivized at every level not to share those memories in full detail. The result is a gradual distortion of history. With each generation that passes, the Primarchs become slightly less real and slightly more legendary. The complex, contradictory individuals who actually led the legions during the Great Crusade are replaced by simplified archetypes that serve specific doctrinal purposes. Leman Russ becomes nothing more than the loyal warrior. Sanguinius becomes pure nobility. Guilliman becomes absolute competence. The messy reality of who these beings actually were gets buried under layers of institutional narrative that serve the Imperium's needs but betray historical truth. The ancient Dreadnoughts watch this process happen and are powerless to stop it. They know what's being lost. They understand that future generations will inherit myths rather than history. But they also understand why this is happening and why, in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, mythical Primarchs might serve humanity better than accurate ones. This understanding doesn't make the situation any less tragic. If anything, it makes it more so. The ancients are complicit in the erasure of truth, but they're complicit because the truth would serve no one's interests. They carry memories that might illuminate the past, but sharing those memories would damage the present. So they remain silent, or nearly so, and the gap between historical reality and imperial myth continues to widen. What they remember versus what they've lost. One of the most fascinating and tragic aspects of ancient Dreadnoughts' reluctance to describe the Primarchs is the disconnect between the kinds of information they can reliably recall and the kinds of details that would actually answer the questions their younger battle brothers are asking. Dreadnoughts, by their very nature, preserve certain types of information better than others. Their neural interfaces and memory enhancement systems are optimized for tactical and strategic data. They can recall battlefield dispositions with perfect clarity, remember exactly which enemy units were deployed where, recite weapons specifications and armor values without hesitation. Their military memory is exceptional, maintained at a high level of fidelity, even across millennia, because this information is constantly reinforced through repeated use. What fades more quickly are the personal details, the emotional content, the small human moments that don't directly relate to warfare. The sound of someone's laughter, the specific words used in a casual conversation, the way someone moved when they were relaxed rather than in combat. These details require a kind of memory that the Dreadnought systems aren't designed to preserve because they have no tactical value. This creates a frustrating situation where an ancient can describe in exquisite detail how Leman Russ deployed his forces during a particular battle, what tactics he employed, how he adapted to changing circumstances on the battlefield, but cannot quite remember what Russ's voice sounded like during a quiet moment in the command tent afterward. The tactical memory persists, while the personal memory fades, leaving a lopsided account that answers some questions while leaving others frustratingly unresolved. For young Space Marines seeking to understand their Primarch, this is exactly backward from what they want. They already have access to tactical reports and strategic analyses. The chapter archives are full of documents describing how their Primarch fought, what strategies he preferred, which battles he won, and how. What they're missing are the personal details that would make their Primarch feel like a real person, rather than a collection of tactical doctrines. They want to know, did he have a sense of humor? What made him laugh? What made him angry? How did he treat his sons when they failed at a task? What were his private concerns and fears? Did he have friends among his brother Primarchs? What did he do during the rare moments when he wasn't planning campaigns or leading battles? These are precisely the kinds of questions that ancient dreadnoughts are least equipped to answer, not because they weren't present for such moments, but because the memory systems that sustain them don't preserve that type of information effectively. An ancient might have clear memories of serving on Leman Russ's personal guard during the heresy, might remember every battle they fought together with tactical precision. But the informal conversations during transit between battles, the jokes shared over maintenance of weapons, the small gestures that revealed Russ's personality, these have faded into vague impressions rather than concrete recollections. This degradation of personal memory, while tactical memory persists, creates another reason for ancients to be reluctant when asked about their Primarchs. They're aware of the gaps in their recollection. They know they once knew the answers to these questions, but can no longer access that information reliably. Rather than admit to this memory loss, rather than disappoint their battle brothers by revealing how much has been forgotten, many ancients choose to deflect the questions entirely, or provide only the tactical information they can recall with confidence. Moreover, even when personal memories do persist, they often exist in a degraded state that makes the ancient uncertain about their accuracy. He might remember that Leman Russ told a joke after a particular battle, might even have a general sense of what the joke was about, but cannot quite recall the specific words or the exact context. He knows the memory is real, but also knows it's incomplete, and he's uncertain whether filling in the gaps with speculation would be honoring the truth or distorting it further. This uncertainty creates a paralyzing effect. If the ancient can't remember something clearly and completely, should he share the partial memory he does have? Would that partial account serve any useful purpose? Or would it just create more questions that he cannot answer? Is it better to provide a fragmentary recollection, or to simply admit that the information has been lost to time? Different ancients handle this dilemma differently. Some choose to share what they can remember, explicitly acknowledging the gaps and uncertainties in their recollection. These ancients might say something like, "I remember the Primarch speaking about honor after we took that fortress, but I cannot recall his exact words, only that he seemed proud of how we had conducted ourselves." This approach has the virtue of honesty, but often leaves the questioners unsatisfied, because it raises as many questions as it answers. Other ancients take a more conservative approach, refusing to share any memory they cannot recall with absolute clarity. They reason that fragmentary or uncertain recollections do more harm than good, creating false impressions or propagating errors that will be repeated by future generations. Better to admit ignorance than to risk spreading inaccurate information about beings as important as the Primarchs. Neither approach fully satisfies the younger Space Marines seeking understanding of their Primarch. The first provides tantalizing glimpses, but lacks the detail to create a complete picture. The second maintains perfect accuracy, but at the cost of withholding potentially valuable information. Both leave the questioners feeling that there's more to know, that the ancient is holding something back, that the full truth about the Primarch remains frustratingly out of reach. There's also the problem of context degradation. Even when an ancient clearly remembers a specific incident involving the Primarch, the broader context that would make that incident meaningful might have faded. He might remember Leman Russ becoming furious after receiving a particular report, might recall the Primarch's exact words and actions in that moment, but no longer remember what the report contained or why it provoked such a strong reaction. The memory exists, but has become detached from the framework that would explain its significance. This creates situations where ancients can describe events but cannot fully explain them. A younger Space Marine asks, Why did the Primarch react that way? And the Ancient has to admit, I no longer remember. I know it seemed justified at the time, but the reasons have faded from my mind. This admission of gaps in understanding can be more frustrating than having no information at all, because it suggests that the knowledge once existed, but has been lost. Perhaps most tragically, some ancients have lost the ability to distinguish between their own first-hand memories and accounts they heard from others. After 10,000 years of accumulated experiences and stories, the lines between direct observation and second-hand knowledge become blurred. An ancient might remember an incident involving the Primarch, but be uncertain whether he actually witnessed it or merely heard about it from battle brothers who were present. This uncertainty makes him reluctant to speak definitively about anything because he can no longer fully trust his own recall. The loneliness of immortality. Beneath all the practical and institutional reasons for ancient Dreadnoughts' reluctance to discuss the Primarchs lies something more fundamental and more tragic. It's the simple fact that these warriors have outlived everything and everyone they once knew, and speaking about the past only reinforces how utterly alone they have become. Consider what it means to be Bjorn the Fell-Handed, awakened once per century to recount stories of Leman Russ to space wolves who have never known anything but the current era. When Bjorn was first interred in his Dreadnought chassis, the heresy had just ended. The Imperium was still reeling from the Civil War, but was recognizably the same entity that had prosecuted the Great Crusade. Leman Russ had only recently departed, and many of the space wolves who had served directly under the Primarch were still alive and active in the chapter. Now, 10,000 years later, every single person Bjorn knew from that era is dead. Not just dead, but long dead. Their bones turned to dust millennia ago. The Imperium has transformed into something the Emperor would barely recognize. The space wolves themselves have evolved through generations of cultural drift until their traditions and practices would seem strange to the warriors Bjorn first served alongside. When Bjorn speaks of Leman Russ, he's not just recounting historical events. He's trying to communicate across a gap of experience and understanding so vast that bridging it seems almost impossible. The space wolves listening to him have grown up in an Imperium where the Emperor is a god, where the Primarchs are mythical figures, where the concept of actively campaigning to unite humanity under a secular banner would seem bizarre and possibly heretical. Everything Bjorn says must be translated through this cultural gap. He cannot simply describe what Leman Russ was like because the very framework through which he understood Russ no longer exists. The younger space wolves would hear his words but interpret them through their own understanding, shaped by 10,000 years of drift from the original context. What Bjorn means when he describes Russ's loyalty and what his listeners understand by those same words might be fundamentally different things. This communication gap creates a profound loneliness. Bjorn knows that even when he speaks truthfully and completely, his words cannot fully convey what he's trying to communicate. The experiential reality he's describing is too distant, too alien to the current age, too bound up with contexts and assumptions that no longer exist. He's trying to describe color to people who have only ever seen black and white, trying to explain the taste of a fruit that no longer grows anywhere in the galaxy. And this is true for all the ancient Dreadnoughts who remember the heresy era. They carry memories of a time that might as well be mythical for all its relevance to the current age. They remember an Imperium that was different in fundamental ways, not just in its political structure, but in its entire philosophical orientation. They remember when Space Marines were soldiers rather than warrior monks, when the Emperor was a man rather than a god, when the future held promise rather than simply more of the same grinding struggle for survival. Speaking about the Primarchs forces them to confront this vast distance between past and present. Every question about what Leman Russ or Sanguinius or Rogel Dawn was really like reminds them that they are the last living links to an age that is now more legend than history. They are witnesses to a past that no one else can access, carriers of memories that will die with them because no amount of explanation can truly pass them on to warriors who have no framework for understanding them. This is perhaps why so many ancient dreadnoughts become increasingly taciturn as the millennia pass. It's not just memory degradation or institutional pressure or personal trauma, though all those factors contribute. It's the slow realization that communication has become impossible, that the gap between their experience and everyone else's is too wide to bridge with words. What's the point of trying to explain when you know your explanation will be misunderstood, filtered through assumptions and contexts that transform your meaning into something you didn't intend? Some ancients respond to this isolation by withdrawing entirely. They speak only when directly questioned, and then only in the most minimal terms possible. They fulfill their role as chapter legends and sources of tactical wisdom, but they make no effort to truly connect with the warriors around them, because such connection has become impossible. They exist in a state of permanent exile, present physically, but separated by an unbridgeable gap of time and experience. Others attempt to maintain connection by simplifying their accounts, stripping away the complexity and nuance that would be lost in translation anyway. They present simplified, archetypal versions of events and figures because these simplified versions at least have a chance of being understood correctly. Better to describe Leman Russ as loyal and fierce in terms the current generation can comprehend than to attempt a nuanced portrait that will inevitably be misinterpreted. Neither approach eliminates the fundamental loneliness. Whether withdrawing into silence or simplifying to the point of caricature, the ancient remains isolated by his experiences. He knows things no one else knows, remembers a world no one else can imagine, carries wounds that no one else can understand. And this isolation is permanent because there is no one left who could share or validate his memories. He is the last witness, and when he finally dies, everything he remembers will be lost forever. This loneliness makes speaking about the Primarchs particularly painful, because the Primarchs represent everything the Ancient has lost. They were the center of his world, the beings around whom his entire existence revolved. His bond with his Primarch was the most important relationship he had, more significant than friendships or brotherhood, because it was written into his genetic code. And now that Primarch is gone, dead, or disappeared, or corrupted beyond recognition, and the Ancient is left trying to explain to strangers what that bond meant. It's like trying to explain what it was like to have a father to someone who never had one, and whose culture doesn't recognize the concept of paternity. The words exist, but they cannot carry the full weight of meaning. The emotional reality cannot be communicated because the listener has no experiential framework to receive it. The Ancient speaks, and his words fall into a void of incomprehension, and he's reminded once again of how completely alone he truly is, protecting future generations. There's one final reason why ancient dreadnoughts might choose to remain silent about the full reality of the Primarchs, one that is perhaps the most noble and the most heartbreaking. They are trying to protect the current generation of Space Marines from a truth they believe would do more harm than good. The Ancients understand something that younger warriors cannot fully grasp. The Imperium of the 41st Millennium exists in a state of permanent crisis. Humanity is besieged on all fronts by enemies that range from incomprehensible Xenos horrors to the corrupting influence of chaos itself. The only things holding the Imperium together are faith, duty, and an unwavering conviction that the sacrifices demanded are meaningful and necessary. Space Marines are the tip of this spear, the elite warriors who fight humanity's most desperate battles. Their effectiveness depends not just on their physical capabilities and training, but on their absolute belief in their cause. They must be willing to face certain death without hesitation, to endure horrors that would break normal humans, to continue fighting even when victory seems impossible. This requires a depth of conviction that cannot afford ambiguity or doubt. The idealized image of the Primarch serves a crucial function in maintaining this conviction. When a Space Marine faces an impossible situation, he can draw strength from asking, "What would my Primarch do?" The answer provides clarity and resolve, because the Primarch, in the mythologized version that the chapter maintains, always knew the right course of action, always had the strength to do what was necessary, always embodied the virtues that the chapter holds most dear. If that image is complicated by revelations about the Primarch's flaws, doubts, mistakes, or moments of weakness, it becomes less effective as a source of inspiration and guidance. The Space Marine facing his impossible situation might find himself thinking, "My Primarch struggled with doubts too. He made mistakes that cost brothers their lives. He sometimes didn't know what to do." These thoughts, while more historically accurate, don't provide the clear direction and unwavering resolve that the mythologized version offers. Ancient Dreadnoughts understand this dynamic because they've seen how it plays out across centuries. They've watched younger warriors draw strength from simplified stories about the Primarchs. They've seen how belief in an idealized father figure enables Space Marines to perform acts of heroism and sacrifice that might not be possible if they knew the full complexity of who that father figure actually was. This creates a difficult ethical question. Is it better to tell the truth and risk undermining the beliefs that enable current warriors to fulfill their duties, or to maintain the simplifications that serve the Imperium's needs, even though they distort history? Different ancients answer this question differently, but many conclude that protecting the current generation takes precedence over historical accuracy. They've seen too many Space Marines die bravely in service to myths to want to undermine those myths with inconvenient truths. They've witnessed too many moments when belief in the Primarch's perfect example provided the strength necessary to continue fighting against overwhelming odds. So they choose to protect their battle brothers from knowledge they believe would weaken rather than strengthen them. They maintain the myths not because they're dishonest, but because they believe these myths serve a greater purpose than historical accuracy. They see themselves as guardians, not just of their chapter's past, but of its future, and they're willing to sacrifice truth to preserve the faith that future generations will need to survive. This is not an easy choice. It requires the ancient to constantly evaluate what can be safely revealed and what must remain hidden. It means living with the knowledge that he's actively participating in the distortion of history. It means accepting that when he finally dies, the truth will die with him, and future generations will inherit only the myths he helped maintain. Some ancients find this acceptable, viewing it as just another sacrifice demanded by their service to the Emperor. Others struggle with the dishonesty of it, torn between their commitment to truth and their desire to protect their battle brothers. The tension between these competing values can be as painful as any physical wound, a constant gnawing awareness that they're betraying one principle to uphold another. The tragedy is compounded by the fact that the younger Space Marines, in their innocence, often make it harder rather than easier. They approach the ancients with such hope and eagerness, so desperate to understand the legendary figures who shaped their chapter's identity. They don't realize that what they're asking for, that detailed, nuanced understanding of who the Primarchs really were, might actually damage their ability to serve effectively. The ancient sees this eagerness and recognizes it as a kind of innocence that he's reluctant to destroy. These young warriors still believe the Imperium is fundamentally just, that their Primarch was fundamentally perfect, that the sacrifices they're asked to make serve a glorious purpose. The ancient knows better. He's seen how messy and complicated reality actually is. But he also knows that these younger warriors need their beliefs to survive what they'll face in service to the Emperor. So he chooses to protect them by withholding the full truth. He gives them the myths they need rather than the reality he remembers. And if this means he must bear the weight of truth alone, must carry the complexity and contradictions without being able to share them, well, that's just one more burden added to an existence already defined by sacrifice and duty. The price of eternal service. We've explored many reasons why ancient dreadnoughts are reluctant to describe what the Primarchs were really like. Memory degradation that erodes personal details while preserving tactical information. Psychological trauma from the heresy that makes honest discussion painful. Institutional pressure to maintain approved narratives. The burden of being living legends expected to embody perfection. The unbridgeable communication gap created by 10,000 years of cultural drift, and the desire to protect current generations from truths that might undermine their effectiveness. All of these factors combine to create a situation where the warriors best positioned to provide first-hand accounts of the Primarchs are the ones most reluctant to do so. The silence isn't conspiracy or simple forgetfulness. It's a complex response to an impossible situation, born from a mixture of inability, trauma, duty, and care for those who will come after. This silence represents one of the profound tragedies of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. The Imperium is desperately trying to maintain connection to its past, to remember the age when the Emperor walked among men and the Primarchs led humanity to glory. But that connection is mediated through warriors whose existence makes accurate memory increasingly impossible, whose psychological wounds make honest recounting unbearably painful, and whose circumstances incentivize myth-making over historical accuracy. The result is that with each passing century, the true nature of the Primarchs becomes more obscure. The ancient dreadnoughts who remember them directly are slowly dying, their numbers dwindling as 10,000 years of warfare takes its toll. And even those who survive are increasingly unable or unwilling to share what they know in any complete or unvarnished form. Future generations of Space Marines will inherit only fragments, stories carefully edited to serve doctrine, myths that inspire but don't necessarily inform. They'll know their Primarchs as archetypes rather than individuals, as symbols rather than people. They'll draw strength from these images because the images have been crafted to provide strength, but they'll never truly know what it was like when these beings walked among their fathers. This is what happens when you try to create immortal warriors. You succeed in preserving them physically, but you cannot preserve the context that made their memories meaningful. You create witnesses to history, but you place them in such circumstances that their testimony becomes increasingly unreliable and increasingly unbearable to deliver. You grant eternal service at the cost of the very things that make memory worth preserving. The ancient dreadnoughts understand this better than anyone. They know they're failing in their role as historical witnesses, that the myths they help maintain distort more than they illuminate, that truth is being sacrificed for the needs of the present. But they also understand why this is happening, and why, perhaps, it must happen. In a galaxy as dark and terrible as the one they inhabit, sometimes myths serve humanity better than truth, and so they remain silent, or nearly so. They give tactical advice freely but personal details grudgingly. They fulfill their role as chapter legends, while privately carrying the weight of everything they cannot or will not say. They are the last witnesses to an age of demigods, and they are watching their memories fade into legend even as they live. When the last ancient from the heresy era finally falls in battle, when the last warrior who stood in a Primarch's presence has his sarcophagus carried back to his chapter's halls for the final time, something irreplaceable will be lost. The door to accurate understanding of what the Primarchs were truly like will close forever. All that will remain are the myths, the legends, the carefully curated stories that serve the Imperium's needs, but betray the complexity of the truth. The ancient dreadnoughts know this moment is coming. They can feel it approaching with each awakening, each battle, each time another of their number falls silent. They are the guardians of a truth that will die with them, the last links to a past that is slipping away despite all efforts to preserve it. And perhaps, in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war and the laughter of thirsting gods, this loss is inevitable. Perhaps accurate memory and honest testimony are luxuries that the Imperium cannot afford. Perhaps the myths that will replace truth are necessary for humanity's survival, even if they come at the cost of understanding what actually happened during the Imperium's most crucial era. But it's still a tragedy. The ancient Dreadnoughts, entombed in their walking coffins, carrying memories they cannot fully share, watching the past transform into legend before their very eyes. They are living embodiments of what the Imperium has lost. Not just the Primarchs themselves, not just the promise of the Great Crusade, but the simple ability to remember honestly and speak truthfully about the beings who shaped human history. They won't tell you what the Primarchs were really like. They can't, for all the reasons we've explored. And even if they could, even if all the barriers were removed, and they were free to speak without constraint, they might choose silence anyway because some truths are too heavy to share, some wounds too deep to expose, some myths too necessary to destroy. So the next time you hear about ancient dreadnoughts being reluctant to discuss the Primarchs in detail, understand that their silence speaks volumes. It tells the story of memory lost to time, of trauma that 10,000 years hasn't healed, of duties that conflict with truth, of isolation so profound that communication becomes impossible. It tells the story of warriors who have paid the ultimate price, not death, but life extended far beyond its natural span, until they become strangers in their own time, carrying memories of people and events that no one else can truly understand. Their silence is not mysterious or enigmatic. It's simply sad, a reminder that even immortality has its limits, and that some costs of eternal service cannot be measured in battle honors or campaigns fought. The ancient dreadnoughts serve on as they must, but they serve knowing that when they finally fall, they'll take with them truths that the galaxy will never recover. And that, perhaps, is the real price of creating warriors who cannot die. Not that they might live forever, but that they might outlive the very possibility of being understood. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the tragedy of the ancient dreadnoughts and their silence about the Primarchs, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are countless dark corners of the Warhammer 40k lore to explore, and your support helps us continue bringing you content that goes beyond surface-level summaries to really examine what makes this universe so compelling and tragic. Thanks for watching, and remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, even memory dies.